All right, so a very brief introduction to me. I'm Marcus Idle. I'm one of the practice heads at Third Space, responsible for external identity and working very closely with the identity practice on cloud identity and all things Azure Active Directory. I've been at Third Space for about 6 years, coming up to 6 years, and Third Space itself has been around for more like 20, working primarily on the Microsoft stack in the areas of identity and security. So in that time, we've become a very trusted Microsoft partner, a gold partner in various areas. And our mission is essentially to provide organizations with the control to liberate. So once you have control of your identities and your organization, your resources, your users and groups and so on, then you can liberate people to do the work they need to do wherever, whenever, invite people into your organization to collaborate and be productive. So that's why control to liberate. So talking about Kryptonite, the issues and vulnerabilities that your organization faces, we're talking about things like too many users in privileged roles, proliferation of security groups, too many groups that perhaps people don't know the purpose of, stale and orphaned users. So this could be internal or external, people who've moved on, moved department, or dummy users that have been created for a specific purpose at an earlier point in time. People have forgotten what they're for, what privileges they have. Guest users not being well managed. So when you invite people in from outside your organization, whether it's as a B2B guest user in Azure, or whether you're creating, you're managing the password of this user, sometimes you have very limited visibility of where they sit in their organization. So are you managing them well, and is there a process for that? Is there someone in their organization, for example, who can step in instead of you trying to manage users that you don't actually know? And of course, bloated security groups. So as people work around your organization, maybe move roles, they tend to accumulate privileges and access to security groups and so on. And sometimes security groups are, repurposed, and you've still got the old users in them. So all of these issues, they may start out as minor housekeeping issues, but it's not difficult to see how they can become vulnerabilities, and vulnerabilities can turn into actual breaches. So, your user who's pressed the wrong button, or maybe trying out some functionality because I think they're on the test system, or even, of course, malicious harm. So when somebody maybe is disgruntled and wants to cause your organization harm. So changing the way you deal with these issues, these niggles, can drastically reduce the vulnerabilities and the threats that they can turn into. So let's introduce Azure Identity Governance. What is it? What can it do? It's actually been around for a few years now. PIM, we'll look at, has been around longer than Microsoft have been calling it Azure Identity Governance. Access reviews and access packages have been around a couple of years now, but then they're very not very well known. So the first aspect of this, entitlement management, that's basically access packages. An access package is a collection of resources. So you might want to give a new user coming into the marketing department, say, access to a number of different applications that relate to their role in the marketing department. And if they're an external user, maybe they're related to a specific project, and when you give them access to the resources they need, if they then leave leave that role, or they no longer need access. When you take the access package away, you can actually remove them entirely from the organization. So an access package is a neat way of packaging up a set of access. And they work by enabling you to create a package of resources, obviously, which can be, at the moment, groups, applications, or SharePoint sites, so any number of those. And the users who access them can be your members, your staff members, guests, or even externals that are not yet guests. They'll make an application for an access package, and then that goes through an approval stage. So that can be approved internally or externally, and then they will receive access. So let's show that in practice. So here we have an external user will have been given a link by their contact within your organization. So it might be that you email them with a link, or they give them a portal to go to, and this will take them to the access portal at Microsoft, and they'll need to sign in. So here we have signing in with a corporate account. So bear in mind, if you are already signed in to the browser that you're using with your own corporate account, then you won't need to go through that username and password rigmarole. And then you'll come to this. So this is basically all the access packages that you've been given the ability to apply to. In this case, there's just one. So we're going to tick that and request access. And we need to give a justification for that request. And we can choose to request for a specific period, but we're just saying no, we'll just make the request. And as you can see, top right, your request is being processed. So this will trigger, this will trigger an email to an approver. And if there's more than one approver, they'll all get the same email. The approvers can also just sign into this same portal if they know that they have approvals pending. But here's the email: approval denying the request by the 21st of December. And that takes the approver to this portal. And it just loads here in the middle of the screen. And you can go and look at the details and see what reason they've given and so on. And then you can decide just to approve or deny. And you can make the approver also give a reason. And that's it. The requester will receive an email saying you've got access, and they can access whatever applications they now should be using via the MyApps portal, or go directly to the application and they'll have access. So this is this is a different user who doesn't have Office 365 or Azure Active Directory. So they'll be signing in with a one-time passcode. So it's a very similar process. It's just passwordless. So they get a code instead of a password sent to their email, and they punch it in, and now they can apply for their access package that they've been given access to. You would typically separate out these access packages for different organizations to keep it neat and tidy. And then, of course, that appears in the normal approvers dashboard. It can get approved, and the end user has the same access as before, as the Office 365 user. So now they're in. So that's it in a nutshell. What can you actually do with the, what are the settings you can set with an access package? Well, as I said, you can give access to a number of resources, including groups, applications, and SharePoint sites. You also have to typically choose a role like member or owner. And when requesting, you can have internal people requesting these access packages. You can have connected organizations, so people with Office 365, or you can apply it to anybody, so any external user with any email address. The only change you have there is if you're using that option, you need to have an approval stage, just to make it safe, so that people can't just put themselves in your directory when they have no, they're coming out of the blue. And you can require reason on request, as we saw, but you can also ask for additional bits of information. And this is a flexible feature of access packages. So you can, for example, ask 3 different questions. Who's your line manager? What's your department? What's your internal phone number? So that the approver has a bit more information to go on. So if you're approving in a large organization, you might need some of this information rather than just knowing who should have access to what. And then at the approval stage, you can have the approvers as the organization sponsors of the connected organization. So you can set those up in advance, and they can be the same for multiple access packages. Or you can have specific approvers, and you can also have alternate approvers for when the approvers perhaps haven't answered the request within, say, a week. So the default value for the for having to grant access before the request expires is 2 weeks, and you can have alternate approvers kick in at, say, after 8 days, and so it removes bottlenecks from the whole process. And as I said, you could have, if you're internal or connected, you could have no approval at all, or you can have up to 2 stages of approval. So, for example, if something's particularly sensitive, you could have the external organization approve it first, and then internal. Quite often, though, obviously, when you have a relationship with an external organization, there tend to be people in that organization you won't know. And the whole point is you're asking one person, one particular contact, or a small group of contacts in that external organization to approve people, and you trust them to approve those people. And finally, you can apply access reviews. So you can have a regular review of who has access to what, and again, you can do that internally or externally. Whoever has the knowledge to say these users should have access to this stuff. So let's take a look at access reviews. So they're obviously a way of dealing with these bloated groups and changes in user status, group membership status. So you can review either a group, or you can review an access package. So when you're creating an access package, you have the ability to create an access review as part of that. So it's all very kind of neatly tied up. And then the reviewers can be the group members themselves, or the access package members. They can be the owners, or they could be named individuals. They all get an email, and depending on their approval or whether they decline, then you can have actions take place. So, for example, if they decline, you can either just report, or you could remove them from the group at the end of the access review period. So nothing happens until the end of the period. And again, if the reviewer ignores the email and doesn't do anything, you can have one of two things happen. You can either just report on that, or you can remove the person from the group at the end of the review period. So let's have a look at that in practice. Sorry. So when they're working together, somebody requests an access package, of course, which has these resources in. And then once they're approved, they go into this cycle of access reviews. So an access review will be triggered, monthly or quarterly or annually. That'll send an email to the reviewers, they'll make a decision, and the outcome at the end of the access review period will either mean the person exits the group or they go on to the next access review period. So let's see how it is in practice. So typically you might have you might be part of more than one access review, so you can choose the review you're doing here. Note this is the same portal as the access packages, and you can manually approve or deny access and give a reason here. Note that we've got some recommendations in the second column here. So deny, approve based on when they last signed in, but we've approved the first three, even though they're all deny. With the rest of the users, we're going to accept the recommendations. So that doesn't overwrite what we've already done. That just provides an outcome for all of the other users that we haven't approved or denied manually. And that's it. So after the end of the review period, those users who've been denied, if you've set it up to remove them, they'll be removed. And again, if they're members of an access package, and that's the only way they have information, only way they have access to your organization, then they'll be removed from your organization altogether. You can set it up to work that way. So it's a very neat way of managing these kind of orphaned users. Okay, and just in terms of the parameters and settings, as we said, you can just report or you can auto disable. The reviewers and targets, so you can choose the group or the access package. The reviewers, as we said, can be selected users, the owners of the group, or the users themselves reviewing. So this is in the case where the information maybe isn't too sensitive. You just need to know whether to keep the user's membership alive based on whether they're responding to emails and so on. And you can split the review so it's just guest users. So if it's a group, for example, security group, you can have an access review that just reviews the guests within that security group. So you can leave the members alone. And you can modify the start date. You can set one up for a few weeks in the future and a one-off, for example, or you can set up a regular one, and you can set them up to finish at a particular date in the future. Okay, so finally, privileged identity management. So this is a way of making sure that you don't need to assign, all of your users who need to do particular tasks, you don't need to assign them for that task permanently. So this is really useful for understanding what's going on in the, particularly in sort of the identity world in your organization, but for other tasks around your Azure real estate. So where you have privileged identity management, you're asking your user to elevate their permissions in order to carry out a task, for example, or a series of tasks. And that gives you visibility of what's going on, because you'll receive an email, you'll be able to see a report on who's elevated their permissions. So it's a very good way of kind of understanding who's doing what and why they're doing it in those sensitive areas. Starting out as a normal member or guest user even, you can be assigned a role. So an example is user administrator, but you can be assigned eligibility for that role rather than what we now call active assignment, which is you have the role the whole time. So when you're eligible for that role, you won't be able to carry out that task. So I won't be able to edit a user in the normal course of events. But I need to go into PIM in Azure. I need to sign into the Azure portal, kick off PIM, activate that particular role, and then I can carry out that role for say 8 hours, and then automatically I'm deactivated, so I'm back to my normal self. So let's see a demo of that. So this is the administrator assigning the eligibility first of all. So as you can see, there's quite a lot of different roles that can be assigned. It's very fine-grained. In this case, we're going to assign user administrator role to Marcus. So the current logged in user is someone called Ybolt. You'll see in a moment. I'm going to log in as Marcus to try this out. So as I said, there's eligible or active. So if I assign an active assignment, it means that user can carry out that task anytime, but you can also set an end date. And you also get a bit of auditing in terms of, active assignments can be flagged to other users. So now you can see I'm signed in as Marcus, and I'm just an ordinary user at the moment. I've got this, I'm eligible for this role, but I haven't activated it. So I'm going to try to access users. I can't even see the other users in the tenant, let alone edit them. So what I'm going to try and do now is activate my PIM role. So go to my roles. I only have one, so activate that one. I can change the duration. I need to give a reason. That's mandatory in this case. And I click activate. Bear in mind also, so you can specify for people activating their roles that they need to sign in via using MFA. I've skipped that step in this demo. And you can also require approval. Again, it's not set up for that in this demo. So your activation has succeeded. And I'm going back into the Active Directory users list to see if I can now see other users. And yep, I can. And I can even go in and edit them. So I'm going to change the name, the first name, last name of this user, and hit save, and all should be well. Okay, so finally, as I said, all of these assignments and activations are audited. So you can go and see a resource audit, which tells you kind of the latest events in reverse time order, just here. And you can also get reports on kind of, how many people are activated, what's the kind of common activations and so on in the summary screen here. So that's PIM. What can you do in terms of setting up? So for each role, so each role can have different settings. Some might be more sensitive, obviously, than others. You can set a maximum duration for activation. You can, of course, require justification, require MFA, require an approval phase. It's very flexible. You can set the length of an active assignment, so that's where you just assign someone to that to be in that role normally or permanently, but you can have an end date for that. and you can require the administrator who's assigning that to go through MFA and put in justification. So lots of auditing going on. As I mentioned briefly, you can have email alerts sent out, so you can actually see when people are activating. For example, if you're another, if you're a global admin or another user assigned to that role, assigned eligibility. So it's all very well sort of managing your users in this way, putting an identity governance layer on top of your users and groups, but of course you need to ensure that the effort you're putting in is useful effort, and for that you need to make sure that you're using that Azure AD identity. Your users aren't using other identities to do other IT around your business. So in terms of how you do that, a lot of organizations have an HR database that they use to populate Azure AD. So that's how people get their sign-ins, which is all very good. And that might be cloud-based and direct into Azure AD up at the top, or it might be something on-prem that feeds into your Active Directory, and then you have you have an Azure AD Connect going on to synchronize those identities. And of course, your external identities, it's useful for you to, for your external users to use their own identity provider or own email address to sign in. And then of course, their identities are being managed. If they leave their organization, they lose access automatically. And yeah, you're not kind of supporting their IT, resetting their passwords and that kind of thing. And then of course you need to connect your applications. So it's all very well having an identity, but what IT are your users signing into? Are all of your apps connected to Azure Active Directory for authentication? Because if they're not, then you've got something called shadow IT, and that's going on, outside of your remit, outside of your ability to audit and manage those identities, because they're not the same identities, they're different identities. So there's a lot of cloud applications, SaaS applications you can connect into Azure AD for authentication, but you should also be looking at your own business applications that you've developed in-house. If they were developed, more than a few years ago, it's highly likely that they're using an internal database for credentials, and that's not the way to closely manage those identities. So you want to make sure those applications, no matter what language they're written in, can use Azure Active Directory for authentication. There's lots of libraries available from Microsoft to help you achieve that. C#, the Microsoft tools, there's probably a bit more help and guidance, but there are libraries for every available, every modern programming language, whether it's Java, JavaScript, PHP, Python, you name it. So your overall program dealing with bringing identity governance into your organization, might look a bit like this. First of all, evaluate your environment, discover those applications, discover the source of your user identities, discover how you're inviting in guest users at the moment, and then second, create a vision document to take the leap, to describe the leap that you need to take from where you are to where you want to go. Then integrate applications. As we've just been talking about on the last slide, make sure that all of your applications that your users use, which give them access to privileged resources and anything around your organization, are integrated with Azure AD. And you might be they might be integrated with an identity provider at the moment, like Okta, but you've already got Azure AD at this point, so it's an Azure AD Azure AD provides you with what you need for authentication. So there's not really many good reasons to use other identity providers if you're using Azure AD. And then fourth box, access reviews and PIM. So start to corral the existing set of information you've got about your users and groups, and then access packages, how to invite new people in to start taking advantage of that neat way of packaging up the information and getting rid of users who no longer need any of it. And then finally, you might find that there are reports or synchronization jobs that you need to do that are outside of the Microsoft tool set. So you might want to create some kind of toolkit to help fulfill those requirements you have. Where do we go from here? So essentially we've described a set of tools that help you get rid of some of these issues. So PIM gets rid of too many users in privileged roles, and then we've got access reviews, which address most of these: proliferation of security groups, the stale and orphaned users, guest users not well managed. That's partly access reviews. That's partly access packages. And access packages again also help with bloated security groups, because you're kind of, when you remove that access, you remove it all. So all in all, you're kind of really reducing these kind of vulnerabilities. So we're going to go to questions now. Please feel free to type your question in the question box. We've got, can you make managers the reviewers in an access review? So different reviewer for each. Oh yeah, so can you make the individual users manager the reviewer? No, so at the moment you've just got a fixed set of reviewers, either the users themselves or the owners or specific users. The request to make managers the reviewers, it's we've had it a few times, and we've talked to Microsoft about this. We know that they're investing a lot in this product, but we haven't seen it on the roadmap yet. Okay, ignore my question. You've answered it. Okay, thank you. Can you make more than one type of access review on a? Can you have more than one type of access review on an access package? So you probably mean so if you have if you want two parallel reviews on an access package. So for example, you might want self-review and owner review. You can't do that with the built-in access package functionality. However, you could create a self-review as part of the access package, and then you could create another review on one of the groups that you've assigned people to as part of the access package. That's probably the best way of doing it. I don't know if Microsoft don't know if they have plans to allow multiple reviews on access packages. It doesn't seem to be possible at the moment. Can you assign a PIM role to a group? Yes, so yes you can. So PIM, this is in public preview at the moment, but you can now assign groups as eligible for PIM roles. So it's a kind of nice way of managing a whole group of users. You might want to do a particular role, manage a resource or whatever. So that's again, that's been requested a lot, and I'm glad Microsoft have now fulfilled it with a public preview, and so that should be going into general availability sometime next year. Okay, so it says here, can you federate with G Suite for external users requesting access packages? Yes, so at the moment, so there are different ways of bringing external users into your organization. One of them is confusingly called external identities, and that's different from access packages. So that is a way of creating user flows which allow users to sort of automatically gain access. You can use G Suite and federation with other identity providers for that. However, that doesn't currently work with access packages. So when you're coming in from an organization that's not AAD, you need to use the one-time passcode functionality to get into an access or get into apply for an access package. Okay, I think that's the end of the questions. Next steps, really, if you're interested, particularly obviously if you're one of those that responded and said that you'd like to put some of this into practice in your organization, we'd be very happy to talk to you. We'd be happy either way, essentially. But the thing to do next is to arrange a vision call. So that's a 30-minute call with one of our client managers and one of our technical people. So typically one of my team. And they will provide you with advice which is basically tailored to you. So understanding your requirements first, and then providing any advice we can. And that's obviously the next step on the Azure identity governance journey if you need any help with it. So please get in touch. I'm going to close this webinar now. Thank you very much for attending, and have a nice rest of the day. Thank you very much.